Good morning, and welcome to the first 3 a.m. rant. I've created this as a means to get some ideas out there, ideas that are also written in a book recently published called The Keys, Suggestions for a New Paradigm. It's a response to a lot of the things that have been going on, a lot of the people who have been posting on Facebook and YouTube about Trump, America, the state of the world right now, how everything seems to be crashing down with the prices and everything. And I think there's one thing that people have not talked about at all. And that is what Trump really is and what he represents. To me, maybe this is just for whatever reason, I cannot really look at Trump as being something that is new, different, something that is someone who is awful or great or the savior of mankind or the destruction of democracy as we know it. I think of him, excuse me, I think of Trump as being a typical white guy. Nothing more, nothing less. He's just a very, very typical white guy. And I think that this is exactly why people have been enamored by him, because he does represent white supremacy, but not white supremacy in the sense of hate. White supremacy that has been established as one of the cornerstones of Western thought, Western thinking, at least ever since the invention of the printing press. This is something that a lot of people don't quite understand. He is, you could say that he is, well, I'll just put it this way. You could diagnose Trump fairly easily. Number one, personality disorder. I would say probably more like an antisocial personality disorder than just like a narcissist. Although those two are kind of like interchangeable, or they're on the same kind of spectrum, if you will. But there's also the fact that he is an addict. It explains a lot of his behaviors. And when I say addict, I don't mean that he's sitting there with a needle doing heroin or snorting coke on the the Oval Office, the Resolute desk at the Oval Office. One of the things that we have to understand is that addiction is a mental state. It is not about the chemical. If it was really about a chemical, there would be no such thing as a sex addiction. There would be no such thing as a food addiction. There would be no such thing as a gambling addiction. We have to look at addiction differently from a cultural perspective. As a therapist, we see these things very easily, and we can recognize where addiction is something that permeates far more of this culture than anyone wants to admit. So let's get back to Trump, and let's get back to him just being a typical white guy. And it's very interesting to me because I listen to people talk about, for example, the racism, the sexism, the misogyny, and they make it seem like, even like when it comes down to like Epstein. I mean, I remember in the 1960s, 70s, right, where you had people like Hugh Hefner, who had the Playboy Mansion. At that time, nobody even asked whether all those Playboy bunnies were of age or not. One could say that we assumed that they were. One could say that it was a different time, and definitely that would be a thing, but I wonder. But you see, back then, no one would have called that terrible. No one would have said it was a bad thing. No one would even ask the question. And we made that person out to be a hero. And then you wonder why we're going to call, and then you wonder why people today would think of Donald Trump as being a hero in spite of the fact, in spite of Epstein. So far, nothing has been done about Epstein. And you can blame whoever the heck you want to blame, but nothing's been done about it. Same way that when we really look at the history of like racism and when I look at racism, I'm not talking about racism as hate. Racism is not hate. I'll give you an example, because racism is really about supremacy. It's about feeling better than others, right? For no reason at all. Now, here's one that has a reason. Let's take a dog. People don't hate dogs. I mean, some people might hate dogs, but for the most part, people do not hate dogs. People love dogs. They love the crap out of dogs, but they're still pretty comfortable in the fact that they're superior to a dog. We're humans, they're dogs, right? So white supremacy and racism, we have to divorce ourselves from the idea that you have to be hateful to be a racist. That's wrong. You can be a very loving, caring, kind person and still be racist as all hell. Okay? And that's the one thing that we need to get over. And just like the misogyny, I mean, we have to look at the beginnings of this country. Let's look at the founding fathers. And when they said all men are created equal, well, it's a foregone conclusion that what they meant was white men. And what they really meant was white property-owning men. Those are the people that were created equal. There was a part of them that understood that, yeah, white men, if they don't own property right now and if they're uneducated right now, they can be saved. They can join the elite. They can be something more than than their lot in life, I guess, at birth. And that was pretty novel at the time. That was pretty new because Europe had already gone through a few hundred years, I'll say, couple of like 500, 600 years, whatever, of having bloodline elites and peasants. And basically, you had kings, the royalty, you had the church, and then you had slaves. That's basically what the structure of Europe was during the Dark Ages and going into some of the Middle Ages. That was it. And if you were just a simple person who decided that you wanted to grow your own food or try to live off the land and, just to have some semblance of freedom, they'd probably call you a witch, they'd kill you, they'd do something to you, they'd torture you to death. I mean, that's just what Europe did. These Europeans did, and that sort of carried forward to the treatment of all other people. But this time, there is a difference. We have to have like this establishment, Hamitic hypothesis, right? Which separated and said that certain people were descendants of Ham and therefore cursed by God. If you look at, this might seem ancient until you look at the Mormon faith, who still holds to the idea that people who are black or people of color are cursed by God. They won't get into heaven unless God decides to turn them white. That's racism. They may not hate. They may think that they could save or be very nice to black people but they still don't think that they're going to get into heaven until God turns them white. See what I'm saying here? And then we have to go back to the sexism, because again, in the beginning, when you have black people during this time, early in America and earlier than that, you also had women who were considered property. They were human, but they were property, like a horse. And you can treat a horse very well. You can do wonderful things and have let's just treat them like royalty themselves, practically. Best food, best this, best that, best of everything. But it's still a horse. They still don't have the same rights as a white guy. See what I'm saying? And so that was the establishment. That was the cornerstone belief system when the United States of America was being established. It came directly from Europe. It had been written already in various scientific papers. It was written in the Bible, the Torah, and by and in the Quran itself, by proxy, or if you want to say. And these were some of the first things that were printed that became common knowledge. And that was because of the printing press. Gutenberg. The first thing that he printed was a Bible. Okay? That's how he perfected his craft. Now, when he perfected this Bible, we have to understand that he was doing this in order to create the printing press. He was creating this Bible not to look up ancient manuscripts, not to find well-resourced information, not to go into deep meditation and find out what the Word of God actually was. That's not what he was doing. He was creating freaking letters. That was the point. He was carving letters and then making them and then casting them into metal so his printing press actually would work. That's what the work was all about. Okay? So to say that this is the Word of God, well, excuse me, but that's freaking bullshit. Anyway, I'll get back to that bullshit part later. So you just look at how this stuff was put forward, even the ranking of human beings and according to race, or the invention of race. Now remember, race is a invention. It is a European invention. So we can't really talk about racism without specifically calling it white racism, because it came from white people. Okay? You call them the scientific community, you can call them whatever they wanted, but they came out of freaking Europe, and it was made into books and published through this nice new invention of the printing press, and it became common knowledge, a belief, truths. But none of these truths were based on fact. We have to also understand that fact and truth are two very, very different things. Okay? We sort of interchange things. What are the facts? What's the truth? What are the facts with the truth? Here's a fact. 65 degrees. There's a fact. It's 65. We got a thermometer. 65 degrees. 65 degrees. Fact. Upstate New York, where I live. January. 65 is a really warm day. An unusually warm day. That's the truth. Nobody around, if you have a 65-degree day and January 3rd, people are going to be running around in t-shirts. And they're going to say, this is crazy, this is wild, this is a miracle, but I love it. It's so warm outside. 65 degrees. Florida, same date. It's kind of cold out today. I think I have to wear a jacket. That's the truth too. But is it a fact? Can you understand the difference between truth and fact? Because while truth is based on experience, truth is based on sort of common agreement between people, facts are different. Fact is a fact. Fact is, no matter when you say it, where you say it, why you say it, how you say it, no matter what it is, it will always be. No matter where you take that thermometer, 65 degrees will be 65 degrees. It just will. Because of the way it's made, because it's created to establish a fact. I'll get back to that one later, I think, too. So you have all these things that were published, a hierarchy of humanity, putting white people at the very epitome and everybody else stages below it until you get to those of African descent who were, let's say that was the missing link. I think that's the best way to say. Black people were seen as sort of like the missing link. Not really quite human yet, but definitely not a monkey, or at least close enough to a monkey for people to think of black people as monkeys, but definitely not human. And when the founding fathers were talking about, freedom and all of these things, were they lying to themselves? Were they just being like, whatever, when they said all men are created equal? No, these were people who believed in the same way that right before Christopher Columbus, most Europeans, mind you, believed that the world was flat. We still got people today who think that the world was flat, in spite of the fact we got photographs of the damn thing. Anyway, so yeah, people believe that the world was flat. We can sit there and look at evidence and say, no, they're kind of wrong. But understand what that means, that when everybody believes that the world was flat. And understand what I'm saying when I look at like Benjamin Franklin and Franklin and Adams and, John Hancock, all these guys, the framers of the Constitution. And the fact that it's a dichotomy that they owned slaves at the time. I mean, at this point, I think it's important that we separate also slavery from racism. Racism was a false hierarchical sort of casting of humanity. It's a way of categorizing humans, white and Asian, or we just do it by the color code they would use, like white and yellow and red and brown and black. And they would have different names for this, but you kind of get the point. There was lots of different versions that came out during those times, but the one theme was clear. White was superior. Period. That's the one thing that always, no matter what was going on underneath, white was superior. And there is no science today, in spite of all the fake stuff that they were doing back then, there is no science today, genetic science. There is nothing that justifies any part, any concept, anything that has anything to do with race. It's a complete and total lie. Back to a word I used before, it's bullshit. The very concept of race is bullshit. It's just complete and total bullshit. But it's bullshit that all those people believed, especially the founding fathers. So I'm saying this because I'm not necessarily saying that they were terrible people or they were all full of hate. I don't think it's about being full of hate. It's just that this is their understanding of the natural world. In the same way that I have a cat and I love my cat, but I don't think that my cat is another human being. And then there's people that abuse animals all the time. So even when we talk about people or white people in that sense who were the abolitionists. I would see abolitionists more like I would see the ASPCA today. They were like animal rights advocates. Because if you really look at the structure of Western civilization, the things that were taught in church, the things that were taught in school, the things that people were taught to believe before they were 5 years old, 6 years old, things that were just being said as practical as if the sky was blue, right? If you really look at it like that, you start to understand that white supremacy was just an integral part. It was a truth. It was not a fact. It was not even based on fact. As a matter of fact, it's more like a delusion than anything else. But it was treated as fact. Fact. Just like 65 degrees in January being a really, really warm day if you're in a northern state or northern part of the planet. And I say this because this white supremacy has never really been challenged. White male supremacy, treating women as if they were property. And where does that come from? Well, God created Adam. And then as an afterthought, pulled a rib out and created Eve. Gave Adam dominion over the world and everything that he created. Created Eve and said, now be fruitful and multiply. We have to understand that there are certain poisons that are inherent in this culture. We have to understand that there are certain things that are inherent to Western civilization. We have to understand that those are belief systems that if I was working with somebody and using a cognitive behavioral therapy approach, I would say that is an ineffective thought. If you want to change your life for the better, you're going to have to challenge that particular thought. You have to challenge it with facts. And I'm dealing with a client who believes what their parents told them about being a failure. Even before they ever had a chance to prove themselves, they were already a failure. And wonders why you can't find any success as an adult. I might sit this person down and say, well, what did you hear from your parents? What kind of messages did you receive growing up? And how many of those messages are still in your own head telling you that you're no good, that you're a failure, that you're this, you're that, or the opposite? How many of those messages that are telling you that you are the best thing in the world, that you deserve everything that you have, that it's okay for you to step on people, it's okay for you to do this because you're better than they are. You can do these things. It's okay for you to do these things. Yeah, maybe they're illegal, but for you, it's all right. You can just go ahead and do that. It may not be ethical, but it's okay. We do that. You do that. We all do that. Then all of a sudden he finds out that he can't have a single positive relationship in his life. Just about everybody who comes in contact with him hates him. Okay, you want to change that? You're going to need to challenge some of those belief systems that you have. Get my point? So, here we are, the era of Trump. We're looking at white supremacist thinking just really coming to its logical conclusion. We're looking at capitalism coming to its logical conclusion. We're looking at democracy married to capitalism with all of these isms, the Trumpism or MAGA and racism and misogyny and sexism and what I would call theism, this idea that somehow you have to be a Christian to know God. All of that stuff. It's like, I look at this whole structure and I just want to throw up. I just want to throw up. There's so many aspects of this entire paradigm that is not just wrong, not just false or, again, bullshit, but also toxic. Toxic. And I'm sick and tired of this fight that is going on, that is really about how do we save it, when the truth is, this is one instance that we might really have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We might have to really come down to core belief systems, competition, ownership, especially property ownership, ownership of other people, enslavement, genocide, torture, all of these things. You can look all the way back to medieval Europe, and there has been constant and consistent all the way up to now. There has been no break in it. The destruction of the environment. There has been nothing anywhere that has ever challenged these basic premises that define what we call reality. Nothing. We get like Barack Obama, oh, it's a racial reckoning. You ain't reckoning shit. Nobody has reckoned shit. And there's a simple reason. Nobody, and pay attention to this when you start looking at the news. When you start looking at everybody who's saying things, and there's people that are saying some really good stuff out there, and there's people that are peddling some real crap out there. But you look at everything on the internet, everything in the regular news, everything in the written news, and I will guarantee you one thing that you will find that is absolutely consistent. Everybody is blaming somebody else. Nobody takes personal responsibility. Nobody gets up there in front of a camera and says, this is my fault. I'm wrong. I have to make a change. And from I to we to every other definition of humanity, all the way through. Every definition of the culture, all the way through. From every individual, all the way through. Now, I can get into my story, but I can tell you in my story, there have been lots of times when I have had to blame myself for the condition of my life. As a matter of fact, there's nobody else I can blame. But I can also recognize that there's certain cultural things that have created more of a negative consequence for some of those things. But there's still a part where I have to be responsible. But that's just my actions. For whatever reason, I also have challenged my own thoughts and my own thinking. Because everything that I'm saying about Western civilization, everything I'm saying about this bullshit, these are the things that were crammed into my head. These are the same exact things that I heard and I was expected to believe. For some reason, I chose not to. I don't know why. But for some reason, I just never bought the lies. Even from first grade, all the way through. I never really bought the lies. Can't tell you why that is. Don't know why that is. Don't much care. But the process of purging these things, purging these belief systems, painful. The idea of going through and challenging my own ego identifications. Painful. But there's something on the other end of that. Something that I would call true spirituality on the other end of that. And there's a lot of people who know about that. A lot of people who experience that. And I'm offering it to you too. This is the first 3 a.m. rant. Thank you.